Competencies of global leaders. Systems thinking. 1. Introduction. In the 21st century, global leaders operate within an environment characterized by unprecedented complexity, volatility, and interdependence. Economic, social, environmental, and political systems are now tightly woven into a single global fabric, where an event in one region can trigger cascading consequences across the world. Traditional linear thinking focused on isolated causes, immediate results, and compartmentalized solutions has become insufficient for managing such systemic complexity. The modern global order functions as a living system in which feedback loops, cross-sectoral dependencies, and unintended effects shape outcomes far beyond the reach of conventional management logic. Within this reality, systems thinking has emerged as a core competency for global leadership. It enables leaders to see the big picture, to perceive connections rather than fragments, and to approach problems as part of a larger dynamic network. Systems thinking shifts the leader's mindset from reactive problem-solving toward proactive pattern recognition, understanding how economic policies, technological innovations, environmental pressures, and social behaviors interact in circular, not linear, ways. A systems-oriented leader acknowledges that organizational performance cannot be separated from the health of external ecosystems, such as markets, communities, and the natural environment. Effective global leadership thus requires an appreciation of interdependence, how short-term actions can yield long-term consequences, and how resilience, rather than mere efficiency, determines sustainability. Through this lens, global challenges such as climate change, digital transformation, pandemics, and forced migration are understood not as isolated crises, but as systemic phenomena that demand coordinated, cross-level responses. Ultimately, systems thinking empowers global leaders to integrate complexity into their strategic vision by recognizing patterns, identifying leverage points, and aligning decisions. With the dynamics of broader systems, leaders can anticipate unintended outcomes, balance competing interests, and design adaptive structures capable of enduring global turbulence. It is not merely a method of analysis, but a worldview one that transforms leadership from managing parts to stewarding the whole. 2. Defining systems thinking. Systems thinking is the cognitive, analytical, and ethical capacity to perceive problems, organizations, and societies as interconnected systems, rather than as isolated or independent components. It rests on the understanding that every decision, policy, or behavior exists within a network of relationships that collectively shape outcomes across time and space. Unlike linear analysis, which seeks singular causes and direct effects, systems thinking emphasizes patterns, interrelationships, and feedback loops that drive dynamic change within complex environments. Peter Senge, 1990, in The Fifth Discipline, defines systems thinking as a discipline for seeing interrelationships, rather than linear cause-effect chains, and for seeing patterns of change rather than static snapshots. This definition captures the essence of systemic intelligence, the ability to look beneath events and trends to uncover the structural forces and mental models that generate them. For global leaders, this perspective demands both conceptual breadth and reflective depth, and awareness that actions taken in one domain can produce rippling effects throughout others. In practice, systems thinking entails several fundamental recognitions. First, organizational performance depends on external ecosystems, including markets, regulatory environments, communities, and the natural climate. No organization functions in isolation. Its success or failure is conditioned by the vitality of its surrounding system. Second, short-term solutions often produce long-term consequences. Leaders must therefore think in terms of feedback loops anticipating how today's actions may amplify or counteract future outcomes. Third, complex global challenges such as climate change, digital inequality, pandemics, and forced migration cannot be solved through unilateral or sector-specific interventions. They demand cross-sectoral collaboration, multi-level governance, and a shared systemic vision. Ultimately, systems thinking redefines leadership as the art of integration. It invites global leaders to move beyond reactive management towards systemic stewardship to cultivate awareness of interdependence, balance, competing forces, and design solutions that strengthen the integrity of the whole system, rather than the efficiency of its parts. 3. Dimensions of intercultural competence in leadership. 3.1. Cultural Intelligence CQ. The concept of Cultural Intelligence CQ, introduced by Early and Ang 2003, refers to an individual's ability to function effectively in culturally diverse contexts. It represents a multidimensional construct encompassing cognitive, metacognitive, motivational, and behavioral components that together enable leaders to interpret unfamiliar cultural cues and act appropriately across global environments. Cognitive CQ involves understanding the norms, practices, values, and conventions that govern social behavior in different cultures. Metacognitive CQ refers to the mental processes used to acquire and interpret cultural knowledge. Motivational CQ denotes the intrinsic interest and drive to learn about and adapt to different cultural settings. Behavioral CQ is the ability to exhibit culturally appropriate verbal and nonverbal actions such as tone, gestures, and negotiation styles when interacting with people from diverse backgrounds. High CQ leaders can adapt communication strategies, prevent stereotyping, and lead multicultural teams effectively. They recognize cultural difference not as a barrier, but as a resource for innovation and collective learning. 3.2. Emotional Intelligence, EQ, and Empathy. Emotional Intelligence EQ, popularized by Daniel Goleman, 1995, complements CQ by enabling leaders to recognize, interpret, and regulate emotions, both their own and others. Within intercultural leadership, empathy represents the emotional bridge that connects people across cultural divides. Interculturally competent leaders demonstrate empathic listening, the ability to attend to subtle emotional cues beyond linguistic barriers, and exhibit non-judgmental attitudes when confronting unfamiliar practices. They manage discomfort, ambiguity, or cultural shock through emotional regulation, thus maintaining composure and relational harmony. Empathy allows leaders to perceive experiences from another person's frame of reference, enhancing trust and collaboration in diverse teams. In global leadership contexts, EQ and empathy foster psychological safety and atmosphere where individuals feel respected, valued, and encouraged to contribute. This not only strengthens intercultural cooperation, but also promotes inclusive decision-making grounded in mutual understanding. 3.3. Language sensitivity and communication styles. Language is not merely a communication tool, but a vehicle of culture and identity. Global leaders must therefore cultivate language sensitivity, the awareness that words, tone, and silence carry different meanings across contexts. Hall's 1976 distinction between high context and low context. Communication remains essential for intercultural competence. In high context cultures, e.g., Japan, Korea, China, meaning is conveyed implicitly through context, nonverbal cues, and relational awareness. Communication tends to be indirect and harmony-oriented. In low-context cultures, e.g., the United States, Germany, Scandinavia, communication is explicit, direct, and focused on clarity and task completion. Culturally intelligent leaders recognize these contrasts and tailor their style accordingly. They adjust levels of assertiveness employ culturally appropriate metaphors, and remain sensitive to silence or indirect responses. Awareness of language norms prevents misinterpretation, demonstrates respect, and facilitates shared understanding in cross-border collaboration. Beyond linguistic proficiency, effective global leaders appreciate multilingualism as a strategic asset. The ability to engage in multiple languages, or at least acknowledge linguistic diversity, signals humility and inclusivity, core traits of intercultural leadership. 3.4. Tolerance of ambiguity. One of the defining traits of interculturally competent leadership is tolerance of ambiguity, the capacity to remain composed and functional when faced with uncertainty, complexity, or conflicting norms. In diverse cultural settings, ambiguity is inevitable. Behaviors that are appropriate in one culture may be misunderstood in another. Leaders who rigidly adhere to their own cultural expectations risk ethnocentrism, conflict, and disengagement. A high tolerance of ambiguity allows global leaders to suspend judgment, explore multiple interpretations, and respond flexibly to evolving situations. It encourages creative problem-solving as leaders learn to integrate contradictory perspectives into coherent solutions. This quality is particularly vital in environments characterized by volatility and cultural pluralism, where certainty is elusive and adaptability determines success. Ambiguity tolerance also supports ethical maturity. By acknowledging multiple truths and contextual moral frameworks, leaders navigate cross-cultural dilemmas with humility and respect. Instead of imposing uniform standards, they seek balance between universal values such as justice and human dignity and local cultural expressions of those values.